turn your study notes to the second, to page 4, lecture number 2, Purpose and Value of Time. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing taken from it. God does it so that men will revere Him or honor Him, another translation says. I have Psalm 65 right here because that entire chapter tells of God's grace, of God's greatness, and of God's goodness. And that just simply ennobles the first statement here, that I know that everything that God does will endure forever. He, God, has made everything beautiful in its time, and He's also set eternity in the hearts of men. Yet we cannot fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end. That was a part of the disclaimer that I made earlier. There are some things that the Bible will tell us about afterlife and the new heaven and the new earth that are just words to us, getting us to think the best we can about things, but that doesn't include the total essence of what it is. I don't believe there will be 1 ounce of gold in heaven. That would degrade it. There's a word we use, that's an anthropomorphism. That is using a term to describe, trying to describe something that's far greater than it is. And so I will proclaim the decree of the Lord, He said to me. You're my son, today I have become your father. And here again is what I had said to you earlier that I took the time to do because I want to go do something else right now. And here it is in more detail. Ask of me. Ask of me. And so the mission of Jesus on this earth was that the kingdoms of this world might become the kingdoms of our God and His Christ, and He would reign forever. So prayer was the heart of God from eternity. And prayer was the center of the life of Jesus and the early church. So all time is present tense with God. If Jesus stays in heaven another 100 years, God has already attended the funeral of everyone in this room. He wrote your name in the book of life before He created Adam. You say, well then why? That took away my choice. No. He simply, if He's omniscient and knows everything, He simply knew what He knows what your decision will be. For Him or not for Him. Or else, listen, if He's omniscient, if He's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnibeneficent, if He knows everything, then He does. He either does or He doesn't. And so my knowledge of an outcome of a World War II battle, which I was 5 years old, my 2 brothers went to the war. And they had spoiled me before they left, and my world dropped away. So I became so fascinated with it as a young man. There were times when I knew the details of the numbers and dates and things. But did my mere knowledge of the outcome of a battle alter it? Now, in God's case, it could, but He says, I didn't, I don't. And God's knowledge of the outcome of your life doesn't mean that He made you do good or bad. He gives you the right to make a choice. Now then, and so all time is present tense with God. And so prayer was the center, again, I say, in the life of the early church. Before we go to the next page, 3:1, there is a time for everything, a season, as we've already read, for every activity or purpose. So did you know that the greatest tragedy in life is not death? It is a life that has no purpose. And the very title of this lesson is The Purpose and Value of Time. And when and as we can become more aware of this and make greater use and proper use of our time, is God honored and eternity will be different. One of the most important discoveries in life is God's purpose for your life. In Proverbs 19 verse 21, this is so amazing to me. It says, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. It's the Lord's purpose that prevails. So what is God's purpose and value of time for us? Well, that's where this lesson should take us now, and let's look at following pages. Page 5. You know, I ask the question, to what extent does our present culture determine who we are and what we do with our time? To what extent has contemporary culture so captivated us in the use of our time, and we only have precious little of it compared to eternity, that it would cause us to stop and give it some thought? Is it not true that all ages have had their culture? All time has presented the circumstances of life in those who lived in that time. But of course, Jesus could have written about computers and about automobiles, but he didn't. But he gave us principles that for any time, with or without those things, it can prevail and avail. Now let's go back then to top page 5. And so we follow up again on that ask of me. That is so significant. We started with that verse in the first lesson. The result of revival prayer then will cause all nations to be your inheritance, and even the remote people groups your possession. Now let's look at another idea here. Life in cycles. Whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before. Whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before. And God will call the past to account. That's verse 15. Now, the fact that that which is past is history allows us to learn at least two things from what's happened in your life so far and mine in my life. Our history. Number one, mistaken judgments and decisions. I will share in the first session after lunch at least 5 different sections of Scripture where when people die, they still can remember. But if I live through the afternoon, I'll also read to you from the Bible that at the judgment, when the sentences are all handed out, that all memory will be gone in the new heaven and the new earth. But look at the importance. That's what this particular session is. The value of time. Things that we've done that weren't in order, mistaken judgments or decisions, and we'll comment more on when this person in the grave, he was already dead, was told, son, remember. Or we may use the past to improve the present and to benefit the future. As Paul would say, I can do, meaning now, while I have the opportunity, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Philippians 4 verse 13. Now, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, 2 Corinthians 5, to receive the things done in the body, according to that which he has done, whether it be good or bad. Now, look at this, while in the body. That's what we would call our time. And done in the body refers to our earthly journey. And what will be has been before. And what will be has been before. That's why I guess you can say nothing is new under the sun. God created man with both the right and the ability to exercise volition. Now, I was talking about this a while ago in another context, but let me repeat this. The very nature of morality is the ability to make a choice. God is the creator, and there are two divisions of the created which are moral. Those are angels and human beings. And without the ability to make a choice, there's not any moral ability. You're simply like the animals who work by instinct and do at the seasons of the year. The little birds now are making their nests. The seasons of the year, how things come and go. They don't have a choice in that. Enemies and nature with storms and the like can interfere with their nest, can blow it away or kill one of the two of the little pair of birds. But when they have the opportunity to do what God created, they don't make choices like you or I. They are not moral. And no animal is. One of the things that troubles me very much. We need to be good stewards of this earth, of the animals on this earth. But they're not people. And I'm insulted, and I'll say it, that it can be heard. When a woman on television calls a dog her child, that dog didn't come through her womb. You understand that? And it's not wrong for us to give care to and concern for those little animals, but they're not human. They're not moral beings. Listen, this idea of morality is big. It's important. And it is something that God created above everything else on this planet. And so, what will be, God created man both the right and ability. However, this must stand under the ultimate will of God, who does all things in view of eternity. That's the key. That's the key to this page. So much that God does in the realm of time, but every bit of it factors into a big picture that's going to be after time. Everything you and I do in this realm, if it's in alignment with Him, it has to do with something that is eternal, that is good. And so when people look at, and so many in this nation right now, all they can look at, all they can see is what's going on right now and what they want right now. And the moral boundaries have been thrown out. And blasphemy and the like of God is horrifying and unthinkable. And so this must stand, the quality of moral existence of angels, mankind, of God, the ultimate will of God, of everything that He ever does, is in view, with eternity in view. And as a result, this should cause you and me to revere and to fear Him. And that's the word that is used in the Scriptures. Now, God will call the past into account. This explains that there's nothing new under the sun. Did you know that Matthew 12, verse 36 says, "But I tell you that men will have to give an account on the day of judgment, even for careless words they have spoken." I've developed an entire lesson on that, on prayer. But for this hour, to think about even our language, and let it have eternity in view. And so often we sin in that very area. I do. I make mistakes in my language often. Not bad words, not curse words. I was taught by a mother and a father, and they have never crossed my tongue. But so far as I mean, it's just what He said, that we'll give an account on the day of judgment for careless words they have spoken. So God will call the past into account. There's a change in matter, but it remains the same. Those of you who are scientists and scholars understand that this is so. Water to ice, or to a stream, and then into water again. And the different ways by which metals and things of that sort may be converted into other qualities, but matter itself never ceases. It just moves from one thing to another. And the great mystery created by time is God exists, duty presses, and immortality waits. There it is. That's the existence of all humanity. God is. Those that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. God exists. Duty presses. Our life goes forward. We have the skills, the abilities to do certain things that He's given us the right and privilege to do. And immortality awaits you and me. Immortality. And this is why Paul in 2 Timothy 1:10 would say that Jesus Christ has brought immortality and life to light by the gospel. Now there's some startling insights here that matter to me, and I think probably to you. And I ask that we study these things with caution. Ecclesiastes, "And I declared the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive." Without what we've just said, that doesn't make any sense. Unless your life is spent in view of eternity and with eternal values. What this verse just says is foolishness to the person of the world who's careless in their value system. Careless. And the 116th Psalm in verse 15, I think I quoted, it's written out in a further lesson in another context, but it says, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of His saints." And those, even of us who are Christians, who are so caught up in the now and now, we just may not be able hardly to deal with that when we're looking into the casket of a loved one. And hey, it's all right for you to grieve. Paul said we can grieve, but we just are not to grieve as those who have no hope. But listen to what, does this not help to explain what we've just said when back in number 5, that all things in view of eternity, the greater degree or extent to which we can look with that idea, then these other things find their place, have their place. And so, 2 are better than 1. I love this passage from Ecclesiastes. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their work. These are just some startling insights for the present. That's what I call these. If one falls down, his friend can help him up, but pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. I love the King James Version there. Woe to a man who's alone when he falls. Woe to a man who's alone when he falls. Sobering thing. So the purpose of time is the opportunity to learn more. And of course then, on page 6, also, if 2 lie together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? I guess the recent seasons we have understood this, have we not? And though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. And again, a threefold cord is not soon broken. I like that translation better than the NIV that's printed here. And you can understand this. When you have legitimate friendships, when there's your husband or your wife or close colleagues that are friends, we're gregarious by nature. We're called sheep by our shepherd. And the very nature of sheep is the need for fellowship and others. And there are a lot of animals that live well alone, but not a sheep. Not a sheep. And so 2 are better than 1. So now let's look at the value of time. At the value of time. God involved mankind in this ordeal. The day of death is better than a day of birth. I've already talked about this idea of Psalms 116, and in view not only of the purpose but the value of time. Now look at this number 3 here. You see, God often seeks to reclaim what was lost in errant lifestyles. That's how time can be valuable to you and me. When some steps could have been taken that were not. When some words could have been said that were not. When some deeds could have been done that were not. Time is valuable, and it has a great purpose. And look at this illustration. Jesus talked about a lost sheep and a lost coin and a lost boy. But listen to me very carefully. None of those 3 were lost at all. God knew where they were all the time, didn't He? He allowed, now look at this. We're talking about the value of time. God allowed time when these 3 were out of place to the people in their time that were living and working with it. God allowed time to express a value of what was lost to be appreciated more when it was found or reclaimed. If something had been out of place for quite a while and you found it, you think about it. Maybe it's an heirloom from a relative or somebody before you, and you misplaced it. And when you reclaim it, why, you just look at it more and more than you did before you lost it. And this is one of the values of time. God can use lostness to bring us back to a greater appreciation. And you see, many of those things are really not lost at all. God knows where they are. And so it's a test for you and me. It's a test for us. And that woman just swept and swept and swept till she found that coin. And the one goes out to look for that sheep that was lost. And the father waits and waits, and he looks for that boy to come back home. I think the father loved the boy more when he got home, and I think the boy loved the father more when he got home. In one sense, the boy was lost in his wayward life, but God knew where he was all the time. God knows where your child, your grandchild, or your friend who is lost really is. God knows that. And there's a great story in the Bible that I love. When we study the book of Acts, we usually get through the first 10 chapters and then maybe 20, maybe 22 or 3. But let me tell you something. One of the greatest lessons in the book of Acts to me is 27. There was a storm. Paul had asked to go to Rome when he was threatened to be condemned to death even in Jerusalem. They go to Caesarea. They go to the little shipping, to the port out there. And there's a Roman ship, a sailing ship. And there is not only there is a officer of Rome, and there's a ship owner. And Paul says the time of the year we shouldn't do this, and the boat owner says we shouldn't do this, but the Roman leader says we're going to do this. So they got on that little boat, and for 14 days, heading west, it jumped up and down just like a chip on a wild sea, and it was as dark at noon any day of 14 days as it was at midnight. And that little boat went nearly all the way to North Africa and came back. And in the middle of that storm, an angel appeared to Paul and gave him confidence. And here's my point to you. If Paul had lost his faith halfway through that storm, every man on board ship would have died. His faith not only accounted for his life, but for those in his charge spiritually. There's some child, there's some friend whose eternity may rest in your prayer life. Don't stop praying. Keep praying. And ultimately they'll have to make the choice. But you will remove thorns and rocks out of the path over which they must travel in order to go meet their God. Rocks and things that Satan has put in the path. And so God, the value of time. That's what we're talking about here. And how God allows time to express the value of what was lost. Well, the boy came home and said, Daddy, I don't deserve to be anything more than just a servant in your household. He said, no, son. We put the ring on his finger. We put the garment on his back. We have a party. This boy is loved more. And the difference between the daddy and the boy over something that was lost. Do you see how God... That's the point in this particular lesson about the purpose and the value of time. And so let's look at it that way. And God is in charge. Not only this, but John Mark left Paul in a very vital time in his first missionary journey. And it upset Paul. So much so that he and Silas parted company. Now that didn't mean that they fell out. They just decided to do different work. You see, you don't have to walk side by side with somebody, even if he's a Christian, that you just can't get along with. At least part on good companies. And so Silas went one way, and Paul picked up Barnabas and Paul for second and third missionary journeys. And when Paul is in prison, he says, send to me that boy that a long time ago walked away, but he's come back to the Lord. I need him very badly. See, Paul didn't have an agenda here, just didn't like somebody. But under the circumstances, he had the right, in my judgment, to discipline. And so he said, now bring it. Look what time did there. Look at the value of time in that relationship. I believe when John Mark walked into that prison and saw Paul, it was a good moment. And not only that, but God often allowed time to reproduce power in the lives of individuals who existed in mentors before them. There were teachers and prophets and leaders in your life before you who said things and who did things that maybe you didn't get it then. Just like the apostles in the ministry of Jesus. But now you do. As you reflect on it, it comes alive. It's something that happened then, and it's coming alive now. I have done a work on maturity. I didn't bring any copies of that with me. And I talk about giving away your death. Just yesterday I had the privilege of sitting with an outstanding young minister who's just being cured of cancer. And he wants to take up my mantle of these prayer meetings when I'm gone. I'm going to give my death to him and to others because That's the value of time. It won't end then when the casket closes. It goes on. The value of time. You know, I tell you, Luke 11 is painful. Let's look at Luke 11. I want to show you another side of this that is frightening. This is just something thought about, not even including this in this study. But I want to share something with you here that is sad to me. These are the woes. Now, Matthew 23 has 7 of them. Matthew 23 is what kills Jesus. Now, Luke is picking up part of them right here in chapter 11. And beginning in verse 43, woe to you, Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and greetings in the marketplaces. Woe to you, because you are like unmarked graves, which men walk over without knowing it. Interesting what that idea is about time, isn't it? Now, one of the experts of the law answered, Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also. You talk about an insult. He's getting ready to say something that I've never heard before, nowhere else in the Bible that I know about. He said, you experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. Now listen, woe to you, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your forefathers who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your forefathers did? They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs? Because of this, God in His wisdom said, I will send them prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill, and others they will persecute. That's hard for me to understand. God sent some good people into certain circumstances so that they could die. You talk about purpose and value of time. And then, but listen, then he says, this generation, not the ones that killed the prophets, oh, they're on the list too, but this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world, from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. Do you know the worst thing for error is to encounter a new truth? When maybe over the years with good intentions we've been doing things and practicing things that meant something when the principle was first put in place, we've allowed it to be reduced to a practice, lost the meaning of it. And when somebody comes along and calls it to our attention, we become upset with them and maybe even try to destroy them, because a new truth is vicious to an old error. Time. The importance and the value of time. So now let's look at this. Also, let me say one more thing here. When suffering great loss, look at the other side. When it's over, and maybe what you have left, loss of business, maybe even a divorce. I'm not the judge, I'm just tossing out life. Look at what you have left, and maybe what is left was more important and valuable than what was lost. And your way, which was confused and painful in that previous circumstance, is now clearer and more at peace. Time can serve you well, and Satan doesn't win in that particular battle. I want to say something else right here. A godly woman was placed in a hospital at home on the 18th day of December 2012. She was released about 14 months later, a few days ago, to a health care facility. Had undergone 30 surgeries. And in intensive care, I don't even know how many. I was privileged to visit her well over 300 of those days. She wrote literature for Christian women, VBS material for women in the eastern part of our country, our nation. And I visited her all those days, and I never heard her complain one time. How much longer she has to live, only God knows. But He's taught me something about pain and suffering. I'm confident that in the new heaven and the new earth, that woman, the new heaven and the new earth will have a different face for her than it does for you and me who do not suffer like that. In that case, if that is true, and it is, then it will not be a curse. As painful as it's been, all she and her family, her husband, have been on her side nearly every day, and her daughter and other members of the family every day. But Satan doesn't win when on the other side, in the new heaven and new earth forever and forever, what she went through, I believe that she will die a martyr's death. And you see, you don't have to die before a knife or a gun or a sword to die a martyr's death. It's living in this world and dealing with time in a way that Satan doesn't win. He just doesn't win that battle. And some are called upon in the loss of property, or maybe of different things, health, a child, any number of circumstances, a whole nation economically to go down. All of these are different kinds of things, but when we go through that suffering and pain, you see there's healing pain and there's suffering pain. And when I use this illustration, Patsy's heard me do it several times, I use it again. When an editor of a London paper interviewed George Mueller in 1826 about his conversion, he was converted in 1825, and the man said he was sitting in a chair and he leaned forward till his face nearly touched the floor, and he said, "I died." That's why in 64 years in the 19th century, when times were as bad as our Depression years of 29 and 30, a long time ago, 10,000 orphan children were cared for, 5 orphan houses were built. At the time of his death, 189 missionaries were being supported, 113 million tracts had been printed, 275,000 copies of the Bible, and nobody knows the portions of the Bible, Psalms, Proverbs, and the Gospel of John, because a good man died. He died a martyr's death. We're talking about time right now and the value of it, the purpose of it. And so, in the fullness of time, eternity came alongside of time, didn't it, when Jesus was born? Heaven came to earth. The immortal became mortal. Spirit became flesh. Jesus didn't surrender status but form. He was divine but not deity. Had he been deity, he could not have died. That's why an angel couldn't have been our Savior, because an angel could not die. It's spirit. He possessed some of the qualities of deity, but not deity itself. And so, what, as a result of it, and for in Him we live and move and have our being, what came to full bloom in the realm of time, and yet is eternal in nature? Isn't that a good thing to think about? What are some of the things in the course of our lives that we have the privilege of encountering that will be on the other side against so much that we have in our lives that's just here? It's just like a tree. It'll rot and die. What are the things? What came to full bloom in the realm of time, yet is eternal? Jesus, agape love, faith, the human heart, prayer. I charge you, keep this command without spot or blame until the appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ, which God will bring in His own time. Which God will bring in His own time. God the blessed, the only ruler, King of kings, Lord of lords, who alone is immortal and who lives in unapproachable light, whom nobody has seen or can see, to him be honor and glory forever, forever, forever. I think I have something else in this particular lesson. And so I just simply want you to think about, as we look at this, the whole privilege, the power, and the purpose of time. You know, as we give consideration to these sweet and beautiful things of the Lord, we honor Him in our prayers, we honor Him in our purposes, and in the plans that we make for the possessions that we have in this world. And these are a part of the way we use time, the purpose and the plan for it, as God has chosen. To Him be glory, both now and forever. Amen.